Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Conversations with Coaches podcast. I'm your host, Kevin, and today I have the pleasure of something I get to do kind of often is I get to meet somebody for the first time as we're recording a podcast. This is a friend and colleague of a coach that you probably know quite well, who's been on this podcast twice already, Joe Sosinski, who is just, if that name rings any bells, you probably are already feeling more positive. If you've had any interactions with Joe, you're probably already feeling better about life. Just a ball of beautiful, positive energy. And he generously introduced me to my guest today, Doug Noll. Doug, give you a little bit of a teaser about what he's all about. He left a successful career as a trial lawyer to become a peacemaker. His calling is to serve humanity, and he executes this calling on many levels. He is an award-winning author, teacher, trainer, and a highly experienced mediator. I've gotten to chat with Doug here for a few minutes before I hit record. I'm already going to have to thank Joe for introducing us, even though I already did. I'm gonna have to do it again. Doug, it is a pleasure to make your acquaintance. It's good to see you.
Kevin, nice meeting you, and thanks for having me on the show.
My pleasure. And I think our audience's pleasure. I'm pretty confident our audience's pleasure because I love what you do. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of everything that you're up to nowadays, I want to ask you just a little bit about your superhero origin story. I like to frame it that way because it's like as every coach or everybody who's moving in this world, they have that moment where they kind of got their powers or realized who they were or who they wanted to be in the world, how they wanted to affect change and make an impact and really do the work that they're passionate about. So how did you get your start as a coach, teacher, trainer, mediator, et cetera?
Well, let's start at the beginning because it really goes back to the very beginning. I grew up in Southern California, and I was born into a family of some affluence, but I was born with many, many disabilities. I was born partially blind, deaf, crippled with 2 club feet, left-handed, bad teeth, bad eyes. I mean, nearly blind. I mean, I was a mess. And so that made my childhood and teen years a real struggle. But I was pretty smart. So I capitalized on that, got admitted to Dartmouth College, went back east to Ivy League, majored in English. And in those days, if you didn't go to med school, you went to law school. So I came back to California and went to law school, did very well in law school, and had to make a decision about where I wanted to live. And I could go back to Southern California and have a successful career down there with a lot of friends and family who would probably get into a big law firm and do all that sort of stuff. Or I could go to the Bay Area where I had some job offers. But I decided to move to Central California because I love the mountains. And I came down here and clerked for a judge for a year and then entered private practice as a young associate in 1978 with a law firm that specialized in litigation and bankruptcy. And they had me trying my first jury trial a month after I joined the firm, which is unheard of. Yeah. My second trial was the defense of a $30 million securities fraud case in San Diego federal court. And that was 7 months. That's how I got
threw you into the deep end.
And sink or swim. And I swam and I got really good at it. In the 80s, and this is my superhero journey took some time. So in the 80s, I took up the martial arts. And around my 40th birthday, I was awarded my second degree black belt in a Northern Chinese Kung Fu style. And then I turned to Tai Chi. And this is where things started to change. Because in Tai Chi, when studied as a martial art, has 2 paradoxes. The first is the softer you are, the stronger you are. And the second is the more vulnerable you are, the more powerful you are. Soft to be strong, vulnerable to be powerful. Did not compute. Right? High-powered trial lawyer, arrogant as all get out. But I kept practicing Tai Chi, again, studying it as a martial art, not as a contemplative practice. And a couple of years later, 3 or 4 years later, I was in the courtroom trying a case, cross-examining somebody, and the thought came to me, what the heck am I doing in here? It just out of the blue. Finished the trial, had a whitewater trip planned up in Idaho on the main salmon, spent 10 days on the salmon with a bunch of friends. I'm a whitewater guy, and just spent the time all by myself powering through these big rapids, thinking about how many people I'd really served as a trial lawyer. And I concluded that I'd only, out of the hundreds and hundreds of cases over 20 plus years, I'd only really served 5 people. And I said, you know something, I'm not going to do this anymore. I don't want to go to the end of my career in another 20 or 30 years and only have served 10 or 15 or 20 people. I mean, people who really came out of the system better than going in. But I didn't know what I was going to do. So, of course, the universe provides. I got home, drove out of the mountains, down to my office, the Monday after the trip and heard a public service announcement for a new master's degree in peacemaking and conflict studies being offered at Fresno Pacific University, which is it's a private university here in Central California. It's a Mennonite school. And Mennonites are one of the three traditional Protestant peace churches. So it caught my attention. I said, well, that sounds interesting. I wonder what that's all about. So I went down, checked it out. Ultimately, I enrolled. And for 3 years, I was a full-time graduate student again.
Never too late.
And a full-time scholar. My life was crazy. And so these guys that taught me, my mentors, completely changed my view of the world. And I began to understand human conflict at a very deep level. So much so that I decided I wanted to change my practice from a litigation practice to a problem-solving practice. I wanted to help people solve problems before they got to lawyers, before they got into litigation, and help them reconcile broken relationships and essentially become a sophisticated peacemaker. And I have many talks with my partners about this, and they said no go.
Man.
They didn't want me to be a peacemaker. They didn't want me to stop trying cases because I was the second largest revenue producer in the law firm. Well, finally, it came to a head in October of 2000 when the managing partner, who was my peer, came in and said, I'm not paying you any more paychecks until you stop this peacemaking shit. And that was on a Friday. And Monday, I called him into the firm manager's office, and here's my credit card, here are my keys, here's my stuff. I quit. I'm done. I'll be out of here on Friday. Nobody could believe that I was walking away from $10 million. And I did. And on November 1st, I started my new business and new life as a peacemaker and a mediator. That's how it started. Then in 2005 is when I developed, in a very difficult mediation, I had an epiphany about de-escalation, and I discovered how to de-escalate any angry person in 90 seconds or less, which we'll talk about in a minute. The neuroscience brain scanning studies that showed why this works so well came out in 2007. And then in 2010, with my colleague, Laura Coffer, we co-founded the Prison of Peace Project and began training 15 women in the largest, most violent women's prison in the world, how to become peacemakers and mediators to stop prison violence. And the foundational skill we taught them was this de-escalation skill that I developed. Now today, Prison of Peace is international. It's all over the world. We got people all over the world teaching incarcerated people how to be peacemakers and mediators. And here in California, this is a statistic I'm very proud of. We've trained over 6,000 people who have been released on parole in California. Not one of them has reoffended, ever.
No, wow.
Yeah, that's
okay. That's the data speaks. That's beautiful, man.
So that's I still mediate and arbitrate, but the power of this skill is so great that I now have my passion in life is training others how to do this. And when you learn these skills, which we can talk about, you stop fights and arguments forever. You can calm any angry person or child in less than 90 seconds. You can build instant trust and loyalty and rapport as a leader. You can build instant intimacy in your personal relationships. You'll never get upset or anxious around emotions again. And your emotional intelligence will go through the roof. And we're not talking about years of practice. We're talking in weeks. You will completely change and transform as a human being. And I've seen it over and over and over again, the transformations that occurred from maximum security prisons to the Congressional Budget Office, where, as I told you before we recorded, that I've trained senior analysts how to de-escalate members of Congress and staff.
It's such a universal skill. It really is. I mean, at the heart, it's really it's right there at the core of human relationships and human interaction.
That's right.
There's so much in your story that I find fascinating. And maybe I'll just have to have you on again, and we can dig into various aspects of your biography, because there's so many different decision-making matrices that you kind of navigated, and you're such a great example of what happens when someone like you, someone like a coach, realizes what their passion is, when they realize that their question, who am I serving, how am I helping, needs a different answer than the one they're currently providing. And then you sat with it, you worked through it, you developed it, and then when the time came for you to make the choice, you made the choice. It was easy because you did all the work prior.
That's right.
I could talk about that by itself for hours. But again, I'm gonna save that for another part too, because I'm already excited to talk about this de-escalation process, because the way you set it up, the way you framed it, It just feels like a not just quintessential, a necessary tool
The foundational,
for
it's a foundational skill of life. And for
yeah.
all coaches that are listening, I don't know what your conversion rate is from prospect to client, but if you apply this skill, your conversion rate is going to double or triple.
Now you're
And
talking.
once you get a client as a coach, if you use these skills properly, your client will never leave you. My wife uses these skills in her practice, and she has clients that have been with her for 20 years.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's get into it. I'm like really. You do, first of all, you do an
everybody on
excellent
the
job.
edge of the seeds, right?
Yeah, the seeds are planted. The enthusiasm is growing, and at this point now, I'm just like, let's just talk about it. So let's talk about this de-escalation practice. Tell me what it's all about in a nutshell.
Okay, so first of all, we have to do a mind shift. And the mind shift is that we are not rational beings. We've been taught that what separates humans from other species is rationality and reasoning. This goes all the way back, way before the Greeks, and has been carried on by philosophers and theologians for over 4,000 years. It's not true. What we've learned in neuroscience for the last 20 years is that we're 98% emotional and only 2% rational. And there's a whole, we could go on and on and on about this. In my graduate classes, we unpack all of this, but just understand that the first step is to recognize we are emotional beings. And the second thing to recognize is that emotional problems and issues cannot be solved with logic and reasoning. So that means we need a set of emotionally based tools that allow us to help people solve emotional problems. And the go-to skill is a skill called affect labeling. Essentially, that's a technical term, but it basically means we are going to read and repeat back the emotional experience of the speaker. And it's a 3-step process. So here we go. Step number 1. You've got somebody who's emotional. Maybe you've got a prospect on the phone or on a Zoom call. And the first thing you're going to do is ignore their words. You're going to say, what's going on? What brings you here? Or to somebody who's upset, what's going on? They're going to start to talk. You're going to tune out their words. You're going to physically not listen to them. You're not ignoring them. You're ignoring the words. 2 things happen when you ignore the words. Number 1, you're not likely to get triggered or distracted by what they're saying because you've heard it all before. But one of the reasons why people have a difficult time listening is because they get distracted by what the speaker says, and it sends their mind off on a bunny chase through the woods.
I was going to say rabbit holes. Yeah.
So we're going to ignore the words because we don't want to listen to them. The second thing that happens is we won't get triggered if we're not listening to the words. And the third thing that happens is we free up bandwidth to do the rest of the process. So you have to learn how to ignore the words. Then the next step number 2, is to read the speaker's emotional data fields. Here's the third mind shift. Emotions are data, just like numbers on a spreadsheet. And our brains have an innate ability to read each other's emotions effortlessly, efficiently, and quickly and accurately. And it has to do with evolutionary biology, which is absolutely fascinating, but we don't have time to go into that. Let me say that our brains have evolved over millions of years to be able to read emotions. The reason that we don't develop this skill is because we live in a culture that says that emotions are bad, emotions are evil, emotions make you weak, emotions make you vulnerable, emotions are irrational. So we live in a culture that says that emotions are bad, and we're taught this from a very young age. Kevin, remember when you were 3 years old and you were out running around? You fall down, you scrape your knee, it starts to bleed. What are you told?
Suck it up.
Suck it up. Rub dirt on it. It doesn't hurt.
Rub a little dirt on it. That's that one. I got that one too.
All children, categorically, all children are denied their emotional experience by their parents. They are emotionally invalidated. And it's the most pervasive, abusive form of emotional abuse exists. There are all kinds of studies that show that when you emotionally invalidate a child, the child's brain stops growing. And literally, children stop emotionally maturing between 6 and 8 years old. And they build up these barriers and walls. I mean, that's what keeps coaches in business, right? And therapists. People they can cognitively mature, but unless they have parents who are really good emotional coaches, they are going to emotionally stagnate. and they're going to block. And so most people have never grown beyond 6 or 8 years old. They don't. And if you feel it, they get anxious around emotions. When people get emotional, they want to problem solve, or they try to rationalize, appease, apologize. They run from conflict. These are all indicators of very low emotional maturity. And it's very, very common. What we're learning how to do is, as a result of all this, we've never learned how to read other people's emotions, because other people's emotions make many, many people very, very uncomfortable, because we just don't know how to do it. It's anxiety producing. So we're going to read the emotions, and there is a way of structuring emotional data so that you can do this very quickly and efficiently and effortlessly. If we got time, I can talk about how we structure the data. But third step is where the secret sauce is. What we're going to do is reflect back the speaker's emotional experience with a simple you statement. No questions, no I statements. If you learned active listening, forget everything you ever learned. Erase it from your memory. Active listening has never worked. It never will work. It is absolutely worthless as a listening technique. It stems from a misunderstanding of the work of Thomas Gordon in 1956. He was the one who coined the term. It's still taught in coaching. It's still taught in therapy. It's still taught in mediation. Oh, what I think you're feeling is X. Huh? It's bullshit. We all know it doesn't work. And yet we persist in using it. So forget it. I got something that's a ton better. But it's counterintuitive and counternormative and pretty weird in the beginning until you figure it out. Once you figure it out, light bulbs go on, and it makes all the difference in the world. So what you're going to do is label the speaker's emotions with a simple you statement. So Kevin, I'm just going to assume that you're upset. And I would say something like this. So Kevin, man, you are really pissed off. You're frustrated. You're angry. You feel completely ignored. You don't feel like anybody's listening to you. You feel like you're unsupported and unappreciated. And you're really anxious and worried and concerned. And you're a little embarrassed about the whole thing. And you're sad and upset and distressed. And you feel completely abandoned and rejected and unloved. And the whole thing is just a big mess that on top of it all, it just pisses you off.
It's interesting how I feel about, like, obviously we're role playing here, but I am absorbing everything and processing everything through my own framing with your assistance. Like, right. You're contributing to me as opposed to separating yourself with I statements. I could sense that the bridge is like, it's rapidly building between us just in that brief moment.
Even though you're not angry or upset, but you could feel yourself relax.
Yeah.
This is the effect. So what's going on in the brain is it's all happening unconsciously. You can't control this. As I label you, what the brain scanning studies show is that the emotional centers of the brain deactivate or inhibited at the same time a part of the brain called the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex is activated. That's the executive function of your brain. So in essence, what I'm doing is lending you my prefrontal cortex for the 90 seconds it takes for your prefrontal cortex to reboot and get back online. And in that process, you calm down almost instantly. It doesn't matter what culture you're in. It doesn't matter what your gender is. It doesn't matter anything. Every human brain is hardwired for this. It works on every single human brain on the planet. We're all hardwired for this. And it works every single time without fail. If it doesn't work, it's because you did something wrong as the listener. It's not because it doesn't work on the speaker.
Yeah, I immediately got reflective and introspective just by the way you were engaging with me. And immediately, it's like it just turned on. I was just immediately like I was introspective. I was like, it was effortless.
Correct. So what happens when you do this? First of all, you're going to calm people down. Second, let's just suppose that they are maybe you're talking to a prospect who may be a potential client. The moment you say, so Kevin, what's going on? And so you now start telling me why are we having this discovery call? And you engage them and listen to them this way, they're going to immediately feel like, wow, this guy really gets me. He really understands me. He is really listening to me in a deep way. This is a guy I want to work with. That's why your conversion rates go through the roof with this. And then as you're coaching them, every time you're on a coaching call, you're going to say, so what's going on? and they talk, and you affect label them for the first 3 or 4 minutes of every single call. So they really feel heard and listened to. So, and that's how you build a relationship. If you're in if you have a spouse or a partner, you affect label your spouse or partner, and that builds intimacy. It creates emotional safety. If you have to deal with anger or upset, you just affect label until people are calm. If you're a leader, you affect label the group. You guys are really upset. You're really frustrated. You feel like you're all being ignored. You can affect label the whole group and calm the group down. It is the most powerful skill I've ever seen. And as far as I know, I'm the only one that teaches it. And it's not hard to learn. It takes practice.
It's almost common sense. It's just with it's the foundation of it is very natural, common understanding of how human beings work, except we've layered so much nonsense over the top of it that what your teaching does, what your courses do, and what your approach does is just kind of remove some of that nonsense and just kind of like, nope, not useful. Nope, inherited from parents. Nope, inherited from, human history. Nope. Here we are.
Exactly. Going right to the core of what it means to be human, and working on a foundational skill that addresses the essence of who we are as humans, which is our emotions.
There's an analogy it kind of reminds me of. It's been tickling at the back of my head for a minute. It's not a one-to-one, but it's something that I've returned to often, and especially just how we structure human relationships and how we structure our society. And I'm thinking about the QWERTY keyboard, the traditional standard layout of a keyboard.
Why it developed that way?
And why it's laid out that way. It was to slow people down because they were getting too fast for the machines to keep up, and the little arms of the typewriter would get tangled.
Typewriter, yeah.
So it was to service the machine. It was to slow us down in order to serve the machine's function, as opposed to be an expression of what we can do and how fast we can do it and how well we can do it. And I think about that so often with the ways in which we slow ourselves down or allow ourselves to be slowed down for other purposes, for other reasons that have nothing to do with our goals.
That's right. And, it's the same thing with how our society deals with emotions. We have this like rugged individualist myth, right? That never existed. I mean, if you know about the history of the Western expansion in North America, the United States, people that went out on the wagons and settled couldn't survive as a family unit. They had to survive in small communities. How do you raise a barn without a community? How do you bring in herd animals like sheep or cattle without a group? It's the whole idea of the rugged individualist is totally wrong. And so we're stoic and don't let them see you sweat and rub dirt on it. It denies who we are as humans, and it's abusive, horribly abusive. When we can acknowledge somebody else's emotions, they feel deeply heard, they feel love, they feel respect, they feel gratitude, and they calm down. And so if you're in the work that I do as a professional, sophisticated mediator, I get called into these highly intense conflicts, high conflict situations, and I've got to de-escalate people to calm them down. And you can't even begin to problem solve until you de-escalate. That's what I teach my graduate students: de-escalate, then problem solve. What do people want to do when there's a problem out there? They jump right into problem solving. Why do we jump right into problem solving? Because we're soothing our own anxiety over another person's emotion. If I can make you, Kevin, stop being emotional because you follow my advice, I'm going to feel better. It's all about me. It's very selfish. It's all about me. You stop doing what you're doing, so I'll stop feeling anxious. And that's why people with unsolicited advice and jump into problem solving. And of course, it just makes things worse.
It really does.
So instead of problem solving, we just take the emotions head on and tell people what they're feeling. So let's do another example. Tell me something, Kevin, that's happened to you in the last couple of days. It's got a little bit of emotional kick to it. Doesn't have to be big, or it could be.
Let's see.
It could be happy. It could be negative.
This is a small, this is ridiculous. It's a small bit of happiness. A few days ago, so I routinely go on walks. It's one of my mental, physical, emotional health. I make sure that every day I get outside, I go for walks at parks, neighborhoods, whatever happens to be around me. And on some of these walks, there are cats who live at certain houses or have certain neighborhoods or whatever. And they're just, normal outdoor cats. And I'm an animal lover at heart. And so cats are very easy just to stop. And when they're feeling friendly, they're very easy to interact with. So I've made little cat friends along some of my walking routes over the years. And there was one who had gotten a wound over its eye. It clearly had been in a fight with something, had like, a chunk taken out of its ear and had a pretty bad little wound over its eye. And I noticed, and like that
Yeah,
day,
you were
like
concerned about that cat.
I was very concerned. Yeah. But that day I was like, I left a note on the house where I know the cat lives. And they're great anyway. Like they're fantastic animal caretakers. And like the next day the wound was cared for, everything was looking good. And the cat was on the road to healing. There's this other neighborhood cat that I also like very much, who's a little wild and like a little bit like an orange cat, kind of like rambunctious, gets a little bit too frisky sometimes. And I hadn't seen that cat for a little while. I got worried because I knew that they were neighbors, that they had gotten into a fight.
So you
And
were
so
worried these two cats had gotten into a little tangle.
I was worried that my two friends had gotten into a little fight and that one had gotten hurt and the other one was now an indoor cat or something had happened. And so and that just, I'm operating largely in like in a informationless environment because I'm just walking around the neighborhood befriending cats. And so a few days ago, I saw them both at the same time for the first time in months. I hadn't seen them at the same time for the longest time. And the rambunctious one, whose name is Vince, comes up and I'm like, okay, I'm going to see if there's any conflict here, if there's any discomfort. There's little sniffs, there's little butt sniffs, no growls, no paws raised. It was a very pleasant interaction. They both let me love on them at the same time. And I was like, it brightened my day.
Happy. It made your day. You felt really happy and satisfied and grateful. And you felt the joy and the love of these animals getting along, and you're there sharing the love. And it made your whole day.
It really did.
It was really
enough that it stayed with me to share it now. Enough that it was the first thing that came to mind when I was like, what's the most recent thing that happened to me personally that I had an emotional reaction to? And I was like,
one of those moments of joy that are unexpected and unanticipated, but when they happen, you just take enormous pleasure from it.
I do. I really do. And I could feel it. I could feel what you're doing. It's just, you're just naturally, you're doing exactly what you described. And I'm just like, I just feel the fondness towards you growing, quite frankly. And I'm like, I almost want to I feel an invitation to even speak more on it.
That's right.
Like there's an opening to where it's like, I could talk about why I love these cats or like why I love cats in general and how I became a cat person. Like I could feel the invitation.
That's right. And that's exactly what happens. So especially if you're a coach and you want to open up, get your client to open up, you affect label in exactly the way that I did here, using use statements, whatever it is, and they will feel so safe that they will start opening up and giving you more and more information. They'll develop their story even greater, which gives you more data and information that you can use to help them with whatever it is that they're engaging you for. In my work as a mediator and a peacemaker, I can take people who are completely shut down, and with a half an hour, they're just going off and telling me their whole life story, and it gives me a lot of insight into, what their values are and what they're looking for and what they need, what are their interests, needs, goals, and desires, which is how we move people from conflict to peace. It's extraordinary how this works, and it's all automatic. It's effortless.
I selfishly want to just keep talking with you, but I think I know I have to go, and I'm pretty sure you do too. I was not kidding. I would love to talk to you more about this and about your own personal history and about the work that you're doing. So I'm going to invite you back on in a few months just so we can keep this going. And of course, to no surprise, you are extremely easy to talk to, even as the host. And I'm saying that as the host of the podcast. So before I let you go, I want you to talk to people about, or tell the audience where they can find out more about you, just learn more about who you are, your story, your work, etc., and where they can best connect with you if they want to start a conversation, have a meeting, maybe start some work together.
Right. So my website is dougnoll.com, DOUGNOLL.com. Tons of resources. I've got online courses that teach a lot of this stuff. I've got books that I've written on all of this. And of course, like everybody else, I do group coaching, individual coaching, workshops, just pretty much the standard repertoire. We're all in this business.
All the tools in the toolkit.
Right. You want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me by email at doug@dougnoll.com.
Easy.
Find me on LinkedIn. Don't reach out to me. I don't hang out on social media much, but I am on LinkedIn a lot. I post a lot on LinkedIn. So you can always connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, or just easiest just to send me an email. And we can set up a time to talk, and I can talk. I'll tell you more about what I do, and I'm always My thing is to teach and spread this as far as I can. I'm looking for people who want to learn how to teach this themselves, because I want my work to amplify out into the world, and I need as many people who are willing to learn this skill to teach it to others as possible, because it's my belief that once we learn this skill and we start propagating it, we can see transformative changes in our culture. I'll leave with this. Whenever we walk into a prison, we go into a new prison yard of, say, 1,000 incarcerated people, we only have to train 20 people in that yard these skills, and within a year the violence drops precipitously in the yard. It doesn't take many people in a community to make the change, but it does take some. And so I'm really interested in working with people who want to learn these skills. If you're a coach and you want to really up your game, this is a skill to learn. If you want to learn how to teach this stuff, then I'm your guy.
I love it, man. I love it. Okay, I'm gonna have to pull myself away. I'm looking up at the Zoom clock, and I'm very tempted to be an irresponsible podcast host and just keep it going. But Doug,
I'll come back again, Kevin. So
yeah, please do. And this has been just this by itself. Even if you never come back on the pod, I'm very grateful to have met you, to know you now, and to know that the work you're doing, know what you're doing in the world. Because it's just, yeah, you've said it all already beautifully. I won't repeat what you just said, except to say thank you for who you are, what you do, for being here today. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And to the audience, you know what to do. I'm assuming that you enjoyed this conversation. Find out more about Doug. Do not hesitate. Do not be afraid to reach out. Start a conversation. Start a connection. I'm sure you can tell that you'll be glad you did. So thank you for listening, and we will talk to you again here in this space very soon.